Okay, I want to call this meeting of the Facilities Committee and call the meeting to order. And I want to welcome all the folks that are here, and thank you for coming. Roll call, please.
Anderson, Hartke,
Here.
Kibler, Quisenberry,
Here.
Rosales,
Here.
Schwartz, Maxwell.
Here. We'd like to pull item number 8, the approval of the Army Corps of Engineer lease from the agenda. The lease is not available from the Corps just yet, so we will pull that from the agenda for this evening. And so I would like a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Has been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Approval of the minutes of the May 5th, 2015 meeting. Motion, please, to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Is there any public participation this evening? Seeing none and hearing none, I will then close public participation portion of tonight's meeting. Communications. Let it be noted that Mr. Kibler has arrived, and we appreciate you coming, Jeff. Any communications from the board? I have none, so we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. You all have a copy of the MedCAD lease, sublease in your packet, and I'd like a motion approving the authorization of the MedCAD sublease for MedCAD to sublease a portion of their space located within the Emergency Operations Center at 1905 East Main Street, Urbana. Second? Questions? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. At the next item, it would be item 9, Engineering Resources and Associate Report, Findings and Recommendation from the Satellite Jail Precast Panel Study. And we have John Fraunhofer here, who's been kind enough to come and discuss it with us and give us a little presentation. So, John, we'd appreciate it if you step forward. Thank you.
As you know, we performed an investigation of the pre-stressed concrete wall panels at the satellite jail here. And the purpose was to investigate 3 identified failure theories. And essentially, what we do is we look at the facts and we look at the theory and we keep working at it until 100% of the facts line up with the theory. If they don't, you don't have the right theory. So the 3 theories that we looked at, first was prestressing strand corrosion. This is critical because the structural stability of the panel is dependent upon those prestressing strands staying prestressed and not corroding. The second theory we looked at was the base connection. This was a substitution that occurred during construction. It is a welded steel connection on the inside face of the panel between the panel and the footing, and it's buried in the ground. Always a chance for corrosion. And the last theory we looked at was whether wind-driven rain could somehow penetrate the panel and cause problems. We knew that wind-driven rain could penetrate the panel joints because some of them are simply just open. You can stick a knife blade in them, and those are the joints between the panels. And the problem with wind-driven rain is that if rain could somehow collect in the panel, then that water in the winter could freeze. If you had a 40-degree day, rain, with the rain during the day and a 20-degree night, that's the kind of cyclical freeze-thaw problems that we have in central Illinois. These panels primarily are 6 inches of concrete on the inside that's pre-stressed. There's a layer of insulation, rigid board insulation, and another 3-inch layer of concrete on the outside. So there's lots of potential for water to potentially travel. And the concrete that's out there cracks from essentially bursting forces. That's what causes it to crack. Something is causing this concrete to crack in tension. Concrete is extremely strong in compression, but only 10 to 15% is strong in tension. Extremely strong in compression, but about only 10 to 15% of that compression strength is the tensile strength. So that's why we reinforce concrete, but somehow there's tension across these cracks, and that's what's causing it. Our findings were we uncovered several strands. You can see all of the locations in the report. The strands are basically in good shape. There were only a couple of them that had some surface corrosion. That's really good because strand corrosion would be very difficult to deal with. The fact that the strands are in good condition is a very good sign. The base connections, we found surface rust on the inside. We found them buried in sand that was moist. And so that's going to cause those, eventually those connections will corrode away. But after 18 years, we found just surface rust on the inside. So at the moment, they're still functioning, which was also a good sign. What we did find was after we were able to excavate the panel, and the insulation layer does not make it all the way down to the ground. It stops about 7 inches from the top of the footing. And from there, it's just solid concrete. So we found that cracking patterns that went vertically down in the ground, and when they got to where the insulation layer stopped, they then went horizontally. Well, there's no tension stress that turns 90 degrees in the world. I mean, it may turn at an angle, but it just doesn't turn 90 degrees. And so essentially what was happening is water is making its way between the inside of the concrete and the insulation layer. It'll drain down because of gravity, and when it gets to that bottom 7 inches that's just solid concrete, it'll sit there, and it's not deep enough in the ground to not freeze, so when it freezes, it creates a bursting force, and that's what creates the cracking pattern. So that's what's causing the problem. It's created by the fact that the joints were left to just fall apart and allow water intrusion into the building. Interestingly enough, in one of the 3 locations that we dug up, we now know that the jail is slightly pressurized on the inside from the mechanical system, because while I was bending over inspecting the strands, I could feel the air blowing out on my leg in the panel joint down below grade. And that's not supposed to happen. That's supposed to be sealed up. Obviously, if the air can blow out, the water can blow in. And once it blows in, if it soaks that layer between the insulation and the concrete, it can freeze. When speaking about rehabilitation of this building, there are 2 critical things to keep in mind. One, the strands need to be protected. So what I'm recommending is that whatever we need to do to protect those strands to save the life of the building, that's the first critical component. The second one is to protect the panel connections, and those connections are at the base of the footing. They are between the panels up the vertical joint, and they're between the roof and the walls. And so keeping those 2 critical things in mind, I established priority levels for you that would essentially breathe decades worth of life into this building. Priority 1 is basically to repair the cracks, and that can be done with latex modified mortars or low modulus epoxy mortars. There's all kinds of wonderful products on the market today that will do that. Epoxy injection may actually be appropriate in some circumstances. Secondly, the joints between the panels all need to be resealed. And Probably need to be resealed on some of the other precast, pre-stressed concrete wall panel buildings that you have. But this one needs all of the joints resealed. And then the walls need to be coated. So when those joints are sealed and the cracks are fixed and the panels are coated, that essentially makes the face of the wall impermeable, and that stops the wind-driven rain from getting between the concrete and the insulation layer, and it prevents freezing and then the cracking of the panel. And so once you stop that, you also protect the pre-stressing strands, and you protect the panel connections, the welded steel panel connections between the panels. The cost of priority one, we estimate to be just a little bit under $400,000. Priority two is the roof. You are reaching the end of the life of the roof with the age of the building currently, so the roof needs to be replaced. But the flashing system was poor, and that allowed water to leak into the building and then cause corrosion on the connections between the wall panels and the roof panels. Fortunately, at the moment, these are all just surface rust. We didn't find any loss of structural capacity. Again, that was a very good thing to have. But we need an enhanced, when the roof gets replaced, we need an enhanced wall cap and flashing system so that wind-driven rain can't penetrate. You don't want water penetrating in your building. And then, amazingly enough, we found places where they apparently didn't put the right precast roof panels in the right place, because there was a connection plate where the top of the wall panel is supposed to be connected to the roof. There was no plate in the roof. They didn't do anything to field modify it, and they just left it. So I'm going to expect that as we replace this roof, we're going to find some places where that connection needs to be remade. That really is a minor cost, but it's a very important thing from structural stability. All of those things together, we believe, are somewhere in the neighborhood of $750,000. And I want to thank the people from Kane Roofing that helped us with a estimate there that helped us build this cost estimate. So we have a hard estimate from the roofer. And then priority three is to secure the base. It doesn't have to be done immediately, but I think it needs, I recommend to you that it needs to be on your agenda. That can be done from the outside of the building with a new connection, and then all of those unsealed panel joints could then be taken care of, because that connection would need to be encased in concrete in order to protect it for the life of the building. That costs approximately $170,000. So, Mr. Chairman, that's in a nutshell is what we found and is what we've recommended. Of course, I never know whether that's too fast or too slow, so I'm going to stop there and then answer any questions that you have.
That coupled with your written report is very good, John. Do any of the members of the committee have questions they'd like to address to John? Geraldo?
What is the urgency of any of these stages? You mentioned 3 stages, and you mentioned them sort of in a priority set and a priority format. The footing, roofing, and then the secure of the base?
Excellent question. I would recommend that, if at all possible, that priority one be done this summer. Leaving this open to wind-driven rain intrusion with the potential of strand corrosion is really playing with fire. So getting the building, getting those panels weather tight and protecting those strands is critical. The roof has some leakage now, but I don't think that that priority two could probably easily be done sometime within the next 2 years. Depends on how much leakage you can tolerate, but it doesn't have to be done this summer. If it's possible, it certainly would be a good idea. And then the base connection, I think anytime within the next 5 years would be appropriate, because the connection now is just beginning surface rust. Eventually, that will begin to plate and deteriorate. But based on where it is after 18 years, it's certainly not going to fall apart next year. Corrosion will occur now at an accelerated rate than what it's been occurring, but it's not far enough to the point where that makes it a huge urgency. So my recommendation to you is that you concentrate heavily on priority one and and implemented as soon as reasonably possible.
Other questions? Quiz, please.
Yeah, Dana, where was this roof on our, like, long-term plan for replacement?
Well, we're developing that, as you know, with the facility condition assessment. The roof itself, building's 18 years old. The roof is basically, should be good for 20 years. So we can continue to, make repairs. It does leak several times a year in various areas. You can see, and John knows this, once you're up on top of the roof, the precast comes up above the roof, and you can see the rubberized material, the EPDM rubber, starting to pull away from the roof and the side of the wall. Those are indications that the roof is nearing the end of its age. It's also a ballasted roof. Ballasted meaning the EPDM is not glued down to the insulation, but it's held in place and weighted down by rock. It's a little cheaper way to do a roof. Problem with the rock, though, is that it ages over time. They use river rock, it's supposed to be rounded, but it does break. It does have foreign bodies in it. When you step on rock on top of rubber, it pokes holes in the rubber. So it's just kind of a constant battle, and we have a lot of HVAC equipment. All the RDX units are on the roof. There's about a dozen of them, plus 2 service towers for other mechanicals up there. So we're on the roof a lot. There are walkways, but when you have to bring up large pieces of equipment, we just had to bring in a, 1,000-pound compressor for one of the AC units. You got to roll them over with a cart, and it's not good. So we know that it's there. It'll be assessed in the facility condition assessment with some time value.
Are there other questions? Geraldo?
John, after the excavation and the drilling of the holes that I see in the diagrams and in the pictures, all that was then resealed?
It was encased in concrete. Yes, so in the attachment, there's the encasement details. So all of those holes, all of that was then formed from the top of the footing up. It was reinforced, and then it was all encased in concrete. So it is all of the damage that we did by opening it up has now been re-encapsulated in concrete.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Any other questions? Well, John, I want to thank you for coming and for the report, and appreciate everything you've worked with us on.
Well, you're very welcome, Mr. Chair, and I would be glad to come back at any time to answer any more questions, whatever it is that you need.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, I'd like to then move on into the next resolution, and that would be to direct the county administration to negotiate a contract with ERA, which is who John represents, to develop the drawings, specifications, and bid documents necessary to replace the precast concrete panel joints for the following 3 buildings. The County Highway Maintenance Building, the Juvenile Detention Center, and the Satellite Jail, Adult Detention Facility. And would anticipate that could be done by administration, and would like to have that negotiated and entered into by administration as soon as possible. And at that point in time, to attempt to have the bid documents ready for the county board to approve the release of those documents at the June 18th meeting. This is a rather ambitious schedule to try to make, but if we hope to get it done this summer, we may need to try to expedite it as the best way we can. Later on, I'm going to mention to you that we will be talking about not having a committee meeting in July. It's something we'll get the committee to decide whether they want to do that, and so there's a very good possibility we will not meet in July. So if we could expedite this process of getting this under contract to do these drawings and bid docs in order to have them ready for the county board to release at June the 18th, it would be very helpful. So I would ask for a motion to basically authorize the administration to go ahead and negotiate a contract with the ERA and attempt to have ERA put those bid docs in time for the June 18th meeting. Appreciate a motion.
I have a question. Is this the appropriate time?
Yes, just as well now as later.
Okay, I had a couple questions. One was, I believe that the sheriff had another company come in and look at some of those structures, and he was gonna be doing it out of his budget. Is that correct or not correct?
You want to handle that,
Sure.
Dana? Please.
When this got started, early last summer, we did bring in ERA to take a look at the cracks, and they gave us a proposal to do a study. This committee at that time did not wish to move forward with that. We had John here present to give just kind of his visual findings and give this committee his best guess of what was going on. At the same time, he made some statements that, were serious enough that we needed to look at. So the sheriff did bring in an outside engineer from Chicago, Dr. Hill, and he came in and gave us his report, but he's not doing any work. He came in just to visually inspect and give us his opinion as well. So the sheriff is not moving forward with any project at this time for this facility or the other two. We believe through this study that ERA has done that we have found and they've identified the deficiencies, what's causing the problem, and proposed recommendations that we seriously need to get moving on. These precast buildings, particularly the panel joints, those joints need to be replaced every 8 to 10 years. That's just being diligent, doing business with a precast structure. That polyurethane dries out and becomes brittle and eventually breaks, and that's where water, wind-driven water can get into our facilities. So they need to be done. They need to be done on all of our buildings that are precast. Satellite Jail, I mentioned, is 18 years old. JDC is 14 years old. County Highways going into its 8th plus year. And we've seen visually inspected, both Jeff and I, and it's probably 50% of its joints have cracks, and they're starting to see a little bit of moisture that they can gain access there. So these are things that need to be done in order for us to protect this facility. As John laid out in his report, both here and in the document, if we don't take care of the facility, it's not going to be around for the future, which will create other problems and costs for the county. So it's a much better scenario to get busy and take care of it now.
And then my second question, if you allow me, Gary, is that if we're sealing the envelope, the foundation, the roof, and the roofing, what is the forecast of an expansion on that building in the future? And would one portion of the building in other words, we would have to undo what we did currently if we were to expand on one side of the pod for later use or later expansion? In other words, if we're going ahead and moving forward with this, I wouldn't want to see the work that we just put in, demolished and then opened up to create another pod. Not that we're going in that direction, but I think in the future forecast, it may lend itself for doing that. And I'm thinking, are we throwing good money after bad, or is there a possibility of not doing that work, doing the 3 sides and not doing that 4th side until we decide on the final expansion of that building.
Answer that, please?
Yeah, I understand the question. Well, first of all, the county board is, not moving forward with the sheriff's operation master plan that was put forth by Gorski, Restack, and Kimming Associates. Their plan that was provided to the county board, basically, you're adding on, but you're only adding on, you're actually building another building adjacent to the existing structure. You are not tearing down necessarily any walls. There's 4 or 5 panels that may come down on the, as laid out in their plan, on the outside recreation area to attach walkways, et cetera, to the new buildings that you're going to be building. So roof structure, panel joints, anything you're doing down below ground level, you're not going to lose any of it with any future expansion of that facility, as was laid out in the Gorski, Reef Stack, Kimmy. Now, something comes up down the road, even with that, the building's designed that you can take a panel down and add on very easily. So what you're suggesting, I don't think is going to happen at all. It's going to be there in perpetuity. You may add on to it, you may not, but whatever you do to it will not impact the physical structure of that facility. Waste dollars, in other words.
Okay, well, thank you.
Other questions? Josh, please.
Okay, so I'm clear on what we're moving on here. This is a resolution to have them prepare bid documents to get people to come in and bid on the actual work to do this joint repair. What's the price tag on this part?
400,000.
No, not on the work, on the prep of the documents.
We haven't worked with them on that, but our thought process is that, it's going to be under $30,000.
Okay,
Well, and quite frankly, their work up to this point was anticipated to cost up to $24,000 for the report you received tonight, and we've actually only spent 17, I think. Is that right, Dana?
Yes.
So we have $7,000 to work with there.
okay.
Thank you.
Where my concerns come in is, we just commissioned pretty much a countywide study on our buildings, and my hopes of what's going to come of that is a list of what's wrong, and this is going to be definitely one of those things. We have a limited budget, certainly in the short run, probably in the medium run, almost certainly in the long run. I think we need to be able to prioritize what the results of that study are along with the results of this. I think that what we do see is that this isn't going to fall down this year. We do, yes, need to do some maintenance on it, obviously. But when we're talking about a potential price tag of $400,000, that's going to eat in a lot of other potential things. We've got the ADA thing we've got to worry about. I would like to see this project prioritized along with those things.
Deb?
I would just point out that in the budget process, this project was the top priority for this year's capital budget, and it is budgeted in this year's capital facilities budget to take care of this. And all indicators are that waiting on this could cause significant additional problems by not taking care of this situation this summer.
So this was one of the projects we budgeted for this year at approximately this price tag. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I don't think this is a project that we can delay on. I look at it in the same light as I looked on the mortar issues at the county courthouse. This is the kind of thing that deterioration only accelerates, particularly since those strands of cable are being exposed by the gaps that need to be filled and the cracks. So I hear what you're saying, Josh, about the list of things we need to do, but but this is one that it's only going to cost more to put it off another freeze thaw cycle. You know, another winter, it's just going to get worse.
Correct me, Dana, maybe help me with this, but my understanding is that we're looking at this project to just seal the vertical panel joints, and with a option to possibly go in and seal those cracks in the panels themselves, you know, the horizontal cracks rather than the vertical panel joints.
That was one of the options that we discussed in listing it in the bid document as an alternate to do the crack repairs. That's the, you know, the concrete panel exterior cracks, repairs, both the horizontal, the vertical. You know, the main part of the bid obviously is let's get the panel joints taken care of immediately at all three buildings. And, you know, that's kind of what we thought we'd do. And that way we would get some pricing on, besides what ERA has furnished us with their estimate of what it would cost. We would actually, you know, confirm with hopefully 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different bidders on what the overall project would cost, and then we can make a decision.
Yeah, the main priority this summer then will be just to get those vertical panels sealed up on all three buildings. If we have money to do those horizontal cracks in the satellite jail, that would be an added plus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a couple questions. Since this is the proposed motion, since there's no motion on the floor, is to have county administration negotiate a contract. Does that in and of itself require board approval to tell you to negotiate a contract? It does not. So you would then come back with a negotiated rate to the full board for approval?
No, the idea of this is just to proceed with this project, to authorize, and don't focus so much on the contract with ERA because I don't think it's going to be that substantial, a contract. We're asking them to write the bid documents for something they've already studied extensively. We don't have the expertise in-house to write the bid documents. So I don't think it's going to be that terribly expensive. I mean, Dana, jump in if you think I'm inaccurate here, but we don't expect it to be. So what you're really doing is just directing that we proceed with getting this done. And we need, the County Facilities Committee can authorize the administration to work with ERA to get this project done, which is what you're doing here. It's all budgeted. It's in the fiscal 2015 capital budget, anticipating that this is part of the expense of getting this project done.
Okay, and the second part of my question relates to the other buildings. Since the focus of the study was completely on the adult detention facility, the addition of the juvenile facility and the county highway maintenance facility was kind of an interesting add-in. Why the need now for those items, and do we expect that to incur significant additional cost to the overall project?
Those were included in the budget for doing this year because there is a great economy of scale of taking care of all three buildings, and they all three need it, doing it at one time. So the capital facilities budget anticipated doing both the JDC and the satellite jail, and the highway will pay for their portion, for their building, for the work that's being done on their building.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Quiz?
I have a comment. I actually found the document that I was thinking about, which was provided to us in 2013, before your time, Dana, so you don't have any responsibility for this document. But it was a list of roof replacements and a schedule for what we needed to plan for. And the concerning thing that I have, and this is why I went looking for this, is this roof replacement is on the order of, what, $550,000, more than that. But this planning tool that we were given in 2013 had this roof scheduled for review in 2016. That was accurate, but the proposed cost for replacing it was $127,000. So it's not even, I mean, it's a quarter. of what it is. And now I know there's other things in there. There's the connection to the panels, but that's not a big dollar amount. Maybe the flashing wasn't included in this, but usually when I think about replacing a roof, I think about replacing the flashing. If we are still using this document for any of our long-term roof replacement planning, it needs to be thrown away.
It's a nice list.
Yeah, it's a list, that's what it is. The ages are correct.
750,000?
Was that actual the total amount of replacement, or was that an annual amortized cost for 2013 to be setting aside?
That was the estimated cost. It had 6,300 to be put away annually to build up to that.
Any other questions? Would appreciate a motion.
So moved.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried, and Deb, you will prepare the proper wording.
Oh, for the motion, yeah. But Dana and I will, yeah.
Okay. I'd like to move on to the facility director's report. Dana?
This won't take too long. Nursing home water heater project, you might remember that we took bids, nursing home board approved it beginning of May. We've sent out award notification to the vendor, Pipeworks of Bloomington. We are in the process, we have a draft contract. It's currently sitting with with Barb Mann from State's Attorney's Office to review. Hope to get that going and get a scheduled kickoff meeting here in the next a week or so. I know that Pipeworks has already submitted to GHR information relative to the water heaters and several other things that they'll be working on. So GHR is already working on approving or getting back information on the submittal to Pipeworks. So we're underway, just don't have a signed contract to date. But once that's done, then we'll have our kickoff meeting, and hopefully that work can actually get started at the end of June, depending upon the delivery time of the 5 water heaters. Any questions on nursing home water heaters? With none, we'll go on to the courthouse window. The bid came in, you folks approved it, county board approved it. The low bidder was Barbara Diatley here out of Urbana. A award notification was sent and received by Barbara Diatley. We are in the same position with, at the same time with their contract. We've looked at it, it's in draft form, it's in Barb Mann's office, so hope to get that back later this week. Hope to get a kickoff meeting in the next 2 weeks. That one will take a little bit more coordination than the nursing home, from the standpoint of we're touching about 60 different offices in the original building. And folks will have to vacate their office for somewhere between 3 and 4 days. So have more to report, obviously, at the next meeting, and should be well underway by, if we don't have a July meeting, but come back in August. Any questions quickly on courthouse? I did hand out a document. I wanted you to be able to see it. Somebody asked, I think at the last meeting, a question of where we were at expense-wise with the precast concrete panel investigation. ERA has turned in 2 invoices which cover everything they've done to date. They are basically done with the investigation. One for $14,740, one for $24,10. That's approximately $17,000. If you remember, their contract was valued at not to exceed $24,700. So their work was conducted quickly, and they did save us money. The remainder of the expenses, which we took on ourselves, Penhall did the core drilling. on 3 of the panels for a total of $800. TSI advanced roofing, cut open the 3 panels and roof seams for us for a total of $1363. And Induced Construction was extremely helpful and helped us with chipping in to open up the pre-stressed strands into the walls. They built forms, poured concrete for a total of $35.85. So our total expense was $22,898, less than $24,700 for just ERA. And if you remember back in July of 2014, ERA's original price was $43,000 to do the engineering work and to cover all the expenses. And I remind you that that was a not to exceed, and it covered everything, not knowing what they would find. So I think how we ended up was terrific. I think ERA did a tremendous job with their report, very thorough analysis. Their recommendations are sound. And I have double-checked several of their prices and with price estimates for the various work, and they're pretty on spot with 2 other roofers and concrete specialists. So,
Okay, thank you. Again, also, we appreciate the work that the County Highway Department performed in conjunction with this project is also. I'd like to move on to other business. I don't believe is there any other business that needs to come before the committee? If not, then I would like to proceed with the chair's report, and I don't have a formal report other than it's been tradition for several years to not do committee meetings in July. And at this point in time, I'd like to see if it's all right with the committee to cancel the July meeting of the Facilities Committee. I'd just like to get the consensus, if there's a consensus of the committee here. And if it's okay, we will not have a meeting in July. Any comments from the committee? Hearing none, I believe then we will not have a meeting in July, the committee, meeting of the
Point of
Facilities
order,
Committee.
don't we need a motion and an action for that?
Do we? All right. Please, thank you, good quiz. Is there a motion to to cancel the meeting for the Facilities Committee in July?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, appreciate it. The committee voted to not to have a meeting in July. Thank you. Yes.
It's my understanding that if there's any business that is relevant to facilities that comes up and is urgent in July, that can be addressed at the full board meeting with a motion to suspend the rules.
Basically, if all committees cancel, the entire July County Board meeting will be suspending the rules to take all business directly to the county board.
Thank you.
I'd like to handle the designation of the items to be placed on the consent agenda at this point in time. And I believe the only item that we would have for that would be item 7, authorization of the MetCAD sublease. At this point, we'd like to move into executive session. And do you have a motion?
I do have a motion. I move that we enter into closed session pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2, parentheses C6, to discuss the setting up of a price for lease of property owned by Champaign County. I further move that the following individuals remain present: the Facilities Director, the County Administrator, and the Recording Secretary.
Do we have a second? Second. All in favor? Roll call. Do you want a roll call? Okay. All right, a roll call, please.
Hardkey,
Yes.
Kibler,
Yes.
Quisenberry,
Yes.
Rosales,
Yes.
Maxwell.
Yes. And just to mention that we will be adjourning at the end of this and going out of session at the close of our executive session, so we will not be returning to this room.